Joy News, independent, fearless, and credible. From our studios here in Accra and around the world, welcome to the Pulse, this Thursday's edition. And coming up this afternoon, mixed reaction greets the passage of the controversial Proper Sexual, Human and Family Values Bill 2021. Whilst religious groups applaud it, international bodies declare Ghana unsafe for LGBTIQ community, threatening grim economic implications to Ghana. We have details as President Akufo-Addo has a daunting task of making a decision on the bill. Also, this afternoon, rising tide of judgment debt lawsuit flood Ghana's Attorney General's office, raising concerns of conspiracy or genuine claims. We have an exclusive interview with the Attorney General Godfrey Damim, plus tell you how a judgment debt of 950,000 Ghana cedis awarded against the state jumped to over 10 trillion Ghana cedis.
Because every minister has the responsibility of bringing to the president's attention the work that the minister has done. And in presenting my report, I deliberately understated the account.
To Parliament, where the minority takes on government for the current intermittent power outages, arguing government is broke and unable to purchase fuel to power some of the generating plants. We are live in Parliament as they demand an official load shedding timetable from the ECG.
1 month of load shedding is more than enough. This is not sporadic, this is continuous, this is persistent, and we think that the handlers of the power sector should do the onerous thing by informing the people of Ghana so they can plan ahead of time.
The Pulse is brought to you by Global Communities Digilu, affordable, safe sanitation for all. We are live on DSTV on channel 421 and Go TV 125. My name is Elton Brobe. Thanks for choosing us. Welcome back. Now let's start with the controversial Proper Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill 2023 that was passed by Parliament yesterday. Now this afternoon, mixed reaction greets the passage of the bill, which prescribes a 3-year jail term for engaging in LGBTI++ activities. While religious groups applaud it, international bodies declare Ghana unsafe for LGBTIQ community, threatening grim economic implications for the country. President Akufo-Addo has a decision to make, which will come with consequences locally and internationally, regardless of the position he takes. We'll get into the mind of you, our audience, shortly to pick your thoughts on this bill. But first, let's get into the concerns of the international community. We know the U.S. State Department and the United Nations have concerns about the passage of the bill. Head of our Foreign Affairs, Blessed Soga, joins me via Zoom. So, Blessed, let's start from the U.S. State Department. What is your reaction to what Parliament did yesterday?
Well, Elton, if you can hear me, the demand is not necessarily a demand, but the caution is simple, that Ghana will pay a price for the passage of the Proper Sexual and Family Values Bill, which is now being passed into law. For the United States government, they believe that this law, if passed fully, as we await the presidential assent, will undermine, the social, cultural, and also economic growth of the country. Is the reason for which they are cautioning Ghana, which has been perceived in the international community for a long time of, being tolerant to businesses and other forms of international norms such as democracy and human rights, as a factor that has always driven the image of the country, and that the passage of this new law could undermine all of that and erode the gains that we've been making.
And let's talk about, I know the U.S. Embassy has also added its voice to the decision taken by Parliament yesterday. Before we talk about the UN, the U.S. Embassy in Ghana, what is your position on the decision taken by Parliament yesterday?
So for their position, they believe that, these minority groups ought to be protected, and that it is not speaking well of a country such as Ghana, which has always been known to be protecting the rights of people and adhering to the rule of law. So for them, the international community and a coalition of businesses abroad who normally invest in this country have, indicated that there's a possible harm that could be caused the economy once we go ahead to pass this law, which Parliament has done. And of course, we are waiting to see if there'll be any further pronouncements on this.
And then the United Nations?
For them, they equally share the same concerns. In fact, they believe that there's also a public health aspect about this, with the fact that there are some HIV cases that ought to be dealt with within that sexual minority group. Just by the passage of this law, a lot more of these people who identify with the groups would not openly come out and to share their concerns for any possible help from the health agencies or authorities. And so the belief is that there are so many dimensions to this, including public health, which will be affected as a result of the passage of this law.
Right, thank you very much. Blaise Suga is head of our Foreign Affairs Desk, and you heard him say reaction coming, especially from the United States State Department, and of course the U.S. Embassy here in Accra, and of course the United Nations. So is this something that was expected? International Relations expert Ishmael Klovo joins me in the studio with more on this developing issue, and of course we also are joined in the studio by the Member of Parliament for Whole West and one of the sponsors of the bill, Emmanuel Bejua. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you.
So let me start with Mr. Bejua, since you are one of the proponents of the bill. Now, the reaction, international reaction we are getting. Locally, it's been overwhelming support for what we did in Parliament yesterday. Apart from the 18 non-governmental organizations, they've made it clear that they may go to the Supreme Court to seek redress. But first, let me start off with your reaction to what we are getting from the international community, especially.
Thank you, and thank you. Good afternoon to
I think we have a technical issue. We'll try and fix it as early as possible so that I can get you to respond. But let me bring it, Ishmael. Ishmael, your reaction to what the international community is saying, especially coming from the U.S.
Okay, good afternoon to you and your viewers. This reaction is expected. There's no way you pass such a law which seems to contradict what is going on globally, particularly pertaining to group, and you will not have the kind of reaction that you are seeing from the global community. So I'm very sure and certain that those who propose the bill, they are aware that this is the response that they should expect, because this government and this institution represent constituents that believe in this sort of rights. So if you pass it, they will come at you with some of these messages. Some are just to put a little bit pressure on you so that they know that the stages of lawmaking, they still have the president. So some of these are a way of getting to the president. Sometimes maybe the president will shy away from signing, the president may delay it. These are ways of getting those things done. So yes, it's expected, and I'm not sure that there's anybody in Ghana's parliament well passing that bill. Things that the international community will take it without a response, because also because of the position of Ghana. What it means is that if one of your favorite charts in democracy go that way, then it opened the door for all others to go the same way, because so far in Africa, those countries like Uganda are not seen as the most democratic of all the nations. But Ghana is championed by the West as the sample for all of Africa, for the rest of Africa. So if your favorite child take a particular path, then you are scared that, okay, if we don't deal with it, then others may follow. So yes, it's expected that they will put pressure, but there's a limit to the pressure pertaining to the kind of world we are living in. And it's also depend on the nation, how the nation rally around what they believe is.
All right, so let me reintroduce Honorable Emmanuel Bejua, Member of Parliament for Whole West and one of the sponsors of the bill. So you've been listening to the concerns raised by the United Nations, the U.S. State Department, and of course the U.S. Embassy here in Accra. Your initial reaction?
Yeah, well, Elton, thank you. Once again, good afternoon to our cherished viewers. It's been expected. I was here last time, was it a week or a month ago?
Yeah, a month ago.
A month ago, when the United States ambassador, U.S. ambassador, came out to meet with some of you, the media personnel,
and said that it will be difficult to promote Ghana if Parliament should pass the bill.
It is not out of place at all. You remember when we introduced the bill, the former ambassador Australia to Ghana also made some statement against the law. And so we've been expecting that. If you look at even the memorandums that came to Parliament concerning this bill, against the bill, well, most of them are like they are from outside the country, not from within. And so I agree largely with my brother Ishmael that yes, we were expecting it, and anyone who goes into this warfare, I call it warfare, should be prepared for the aftermath of the war. And so we were ready and we are prepared for it.
Right. So going forward, I mean, the ambassador made her position known before the passage of the bill. Now, the U.S. State Department, they've added their voice to it, virtually not in support of what you did in Parliament yesterday. But you say that you had the support of the Republic in pushing through this bill. So you are only representing the aspiration and the wishes of the Ghanaian public. Now, within the country itself, we've also seen opposition to what you've done in Parliament yesterday, with the 18 years old threatening to go to the Supreme Court if President Akufo-Addo should append his signature to the passage or to the bill that you passed in Parliament yesterday. What's your reaction to that as well?
Well, our reaction is so simple. Anybody at all, per our constitution in Ghana, can go to the Supreme Court for interpretation or annulment of the laws that are made in Parliament. And so it's entirely their constitutional right to go to court if the president, and I believe the president will assent to it, as the president assent to it, it's their constitutional right to go to court. Having said that, we are not perturbed at all. You should understand the framework of those who supported this bill. Currently in Parliament, I would say 90 to 99% of members supported the bill. In fact, almost everybody, except one or two people. Even that, for instance, the
majority leader yesterday has some concern.
Yeah, he has concern. His concern has to do with either we should have community service or custodian sentencing. And some of us thought that, well, because we don't have any community service law in Ghana, there's no framework for community service. We cannot, make a law that will ask for community service. All we have currently is a custodial services. So he is not against the bill, but just that he wanted the sentencing regime to be changed. Now, having said that, if all of us are for the bill and Ghanaians have elected us to go and represent the moral conscience of Ghana, and we have come out with a bill that is supposed to protect the morality of Ghanaians, the culture of Ghanaians, the sanctity of Ghanaians, and somebody else from somewhere else, including the minority group, the so-called G18, that comes out to say that they are not interested in the bill. I mean, they have every right to do whatever they want to do. But the bill has been passed. It's left the president to assent to it, and the president will assent to it.
We'll come to that. But Ishmael, are we in danger of facing economic sanctions because of what our parliament did yesterday?
No.
Are there examples that we can cite in Africa, for example?
The Ghanaian law looks remarkably different from a place like Uganda, because in the Ugandan case, some of the punishment in that law include death punishment. I mean, so if you look at from the beginning, the concerns that have been raised by various groups that have been integrated into the law, the Ghanaian law appears to be a little bit more moderate. So we may not expect the level of sanctions, the level of punishment that they meted out to Uganda, for example, where the World Bank will stop additional funding for certain projects, and the U.S. Department will consider sanctions and even taking them off AGOA. The Ghanaian law appears to go through a lot of consultation. Therefore, some of the harsher punishment, as it were, have been watered down. But having said that, it is tempting on the part of the international community to try and stop this trend of African countries enacting laws to halt the development of what they perceive as human rights. So we may not actually have direct sanctions, but there are indirect ways of sometimes cajoling nations into some of the things that they want to do. So as you see, some of the statements are diplomatic statements to whip up the pressure on the president, because then the president have to deal with all these nations, have to listen to all this, and then decide, is it in the interest of this nation or not? And I think that the president will be in a very dicey situation, on one hand, the domestic political situation make it very difficult for him to resist it.
To say no.
To say no. Because you see, once you resist it, and we are getting to December, it becomes a political issue. So you need to do something about it. At the same time, if you sign it, and you have to go and explain to the international community why you do so. But I think that where we are now, the bill has already been passed.
We will hear from the Attorney General pretty shortly. Yesterday, whilst Parliament was in the process of taking the bill through third reading, one of my colleagues, Koyo Jansen, was in the office of the Attorney General and had an interview with him. We're going to bring that interview to our viewers shortly, where he makes the point that he, as Attorney General and then the number one, or if you like, the legal advisor to the President, he will not advise the President to sign onto law any instrument or bill that seeks to infringe on the rights of an individual. So clearly we are getting to understand the mind of the President going into this matter. What is your reaction? And then I come to Honorable Vedra.
You see, that's true. As an individual, he has a legal position, he has a certain perception of, because human rights are interpreted in various forms. Some people believe that it's a matter of the individual. Therefore, it's universalized. It doesn't matter where you are. Either you are born in Ghana, Kyrgyzstan, or wherever. The same right applies to all of us. Some people also take the view that it is cultural dependent. So every culture defines what rights are applicable. Now, so he being the chief legal advisor, he will give his legal advice. But we also must situate that legal advice within the political and the socio-cultural environment. And that's why I said it will be a very dicey issue for the President, because you may take the stand I will not sign. And then the groups that are pushing it, if it becomes politicized, then you have to pay the political price for your action. That's why it is quite a very dicey issue for the President. Particularly if you are facing a situation where you want to break the 8 and all those kind of things. I'm not sure you should push it to that level. So I think they will take all this into consideration. The view of the legal advisor to the President. Yeah, of course, he's right to say that, because it comes from a particular angle where they see law as human rights as universal. But the majority of the people in this nation whom you represent, who the President represents, seems to lean to the side where they say that as for this behavior, it's not what we wanted. So,
but how do you think Ghana will be viewed in the international community? We have our foreign minister, for example, bidding to become the General Secretary of the Commonwealth Organization. She's campaigning. With this development, how do you think, will it be a blowback on her?
Well,
it
will be some burden that she has to carry into that fight. But then let us not make it look like it's only Ghana that has anti-gay legislation. Most of the Muslim world, they don't tolerate this behavior. But then they have people who are leading many international organizations. The only thing here is that given the push by the West to have these rights promoted across the globe, this is like a pushback of the advances they have made all these years, particularly given that they have used aid and other things to promote it. For you to have a country that over the years you have seen as one of your own, one of your obedient servant, going against the tide, that is why it looks like we are taking. Assuming the country like Saudi Arabia decided to reform their legislation and put in harsher punishment, the world will not react the way they are reacting, because then they are framed in a particular light. It is the way they view Ghana. It is the way they look at the country.
Because you are dependent. I mean,
yes,
you had the U.S. added voice to your request to have a bailout from the IMF. You are definitely not your.
Yeah, you can. Yes, you are.
And therefore, you are open to all kind of manipulation.
And that is true. But sometimes you see, that's why sometimes some of these issues may happen to teach you that you can't depend on people forever. There's a point at which you have to stand up for your own. The further we are dependent, as if they give us points, we should take it.
let me bring in Honorable Benjamin. So, Honorable, you have passed a law that says that if I am a man and I decide to have a relationship with a fellow man instead of the opposite sex, I should be jailed for 3 years. That is my right. That is my individual volition. I have decided to adopt that kind of lifestyle. And you say that it shouldn't be consistent with what you have passed in Parliament?
Well,
explain to me.
I think there are two things that people are confusing: the individual right enshrined in our Constitution. Now, the question is, what is individual right or human right? What does our Constitution say? As our Constitution says that a man can marry another man as your right, or whatever you do in your bedroom is your right. The Constitution does not say that at all. The Constitution talks about the fact that you have the right to live. That's one of them. You have the right to economic life, to have a job to do. You have a right to join associations. Let me take the first one, right to live. How does a man live? A man can only live when a man and a woman gives birth to one person to live. So is it we, the proponents of the law, that are saying that that are stopping the human right in Ghana, or those who think that a man can marry a man without giving birth to another human being to live are those who are providing life for people? So we need to understand that human right stops at the end of where your right starts.
Right.
That is the first thing. And so we, the proponents of the law, are not saying that you cannot do whatever you want to do in your bedroom. You can do it. Just as you can steal goat anywhere. But as soon as you are caught for stealing goat,
That's another issue.
that's another issue. So we are saying now, Elton, today, or from when the president was sent to it, if this law comes into being, you cannot marry a man in this country. Or you cannot go to a priest that I have an animal, a pet in my house, and I'm interested in my pet, therefore I want to marry my pet. We are also saying that henceforth, you cannot adopt if you decide that you want to be a gay in your private life without anybody knowing. You cannot adopt a child. We're also saying that you cannot go to the hospital and say, no, I want to change my
sexual orientation
to become a woman. We say we cannot do that because there are three things that that all of us must look at that supports this bill. One, the moral conscience of this nation, which is enshrined in our Constitution, that we should protect the culture of this nation. That's one. Two, what we are talking about, African personality. Everybody talks about African personality, and my brother rightly said it. Kwame Nkrumah talks about we as African, we must stand as African. No wonder our president, the current president, said, Ghana beyond aid. Do we have to continue depending on people forever? If you cannot stand on your right as an African, as a Ghanaian, to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I want to do, then you have, and the third one has to do with the fact that Ghana is a spiritual nation, religious nation. Even though we said our constitution is a secular constitution, we are religious in nature. So we have religious group now coming out, including regional house of chief, national house of chief, coming to say that we frown on this thing called right. It is not a right, it's a lifestyle. Somebody decided that this is what I want to do. And you tell me that it's all right. If this is what you want to do, then go and steal and see whether you not be stoned or you not be killed. And so we should not confuse the two at all that it's human right. People should stop deceiving us. People should stop throwing dust into our eyes and by saying that it's the right of someone. It's not your right. Because when you were born as a man. And you can't tell me that when you were born as a man, your father or mother taught you that go and have sex with another man. And tell me that is the orientation.
So, Afenya Markin's issue had to do with custodial and non-custodial. That you say that there's no law that says that one can be sentenced to do community service. So that the reason that proposed amendment was crushed. But me as a media person, the law also imposes some obligations on me. If I am seen to be promoting activities of the LGBTI community, I may be in favor of the law. Now, some are suggesting that you are seeking to introduce a criminal libel law through the passage of this, bill.
Okay, so for the first time in the history of this parliament, this bill has undergone two consideration stages. The first one, the second consideration stage was done weeks ago. That was last week. And then yesterday, we went to another consideration. This thing came up. And if you look at our clause 10 of the bill, which we changed slightly, because we also have seen that the Constitution provides that the media should be protected.
Absolutely.
The freedom of the media. And so we said, we introduce a sentence here in this part. That's a prohibition of propaganda, promotion, and advocacy for activities prohibited under this act. So now we said that we said a person who, but before the person who comes, we say subject to the provision of our Constitution. Mm-hmm. So whoever is a judge will subject your whatever you've done,
the conduct,
to the provision of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. Before, through a medium, mm-hmm. technological platform, technological account, or any other means produces, procure, market, broadcast. So the judge who is to judge your issue will not just stand up and he will subject whatever has brought about you mm-hmm. to the Constitution.
All right.
And so the media is protected. Those who think that we are introducing the criminal libel law, please, we have not done that. Rather, we are protecting you.
Now, let's look at implications. And I want to start with you, and I'll come to ask of personal issues. I remember that in a run-up to the NDC's parliamentary primaries, some of your members, some of the co-sponsors of this bill, complained about the fact that some people were trying to get them out of parliament because of their position on the bill. Now, I remember when I spoke to you some time back, you were having issues with, your visa with the U.S. Embassy and stuff. We'll come to that. But Ishmael, so the facts have been laid bare. We have put ourselves, this morning when I woke up, DWTV, BBC, CNN, everybody was talking about Ghana. And they were talking about Ghana because we're taking a position that is not consistent with what they believe to be the norm. So going forward, how should our international relations be now that we appear to be deviating from what appears to be the darling boy of the West?
Well, anyway, for now, we have passed this legislation. And as in my mind, we will have to take some of the consequences for it. For instance, I expect most Western nations to publish travel advisory for their citizens, where they will caution those in that community that Ghana is not that safe for them. And therefore,
especially for those who are the LGBT
community. Yes, within that community.
We don't even want them in Ghana.
So within that community, you may have a situation where most Western nations will put out an advice to them in terms of traveling to Ghana. So you expect that if there are quite a number of them that used to visit Ghana, that will reduce. And then you must also look at the situation where, in terms of foreign direct investment, businesses that are pro-LGBTQ will shy away from Ghana. We should be ready for that. And then again, in those Western nations, there are people who will buy goods coming from certain countries based on certain rights. They also shy away from certain goods coming from certain countries noted for certain rights. So if it gets consumed globally that Ghana is anti-gay country, then you expect that there are some constituents within the U.S. and all those Western nations that may not want to purchase certain items from Ghana because then they perceive that these people are against a certain section of human rights. So yes, this...
And are we ready for this? Are we ready to what extent will this have effect on our economy? An economy that depends largely on foreign inflow.
So that's why I say it depends on the number of them who are already doing business here, and depends on how they assess the viability of their business interests in Ghana. So if you are an LGBTQ plus person and you look at your business interest in Ghana and it's very viable, then you have the choice to say, okay, I can come to Ghana, I can do my business, but during the period of stay in that country, then I may have to control my sexual urge. So it also depends on what they get here, and so those calculations will have to be done. I don't expect a major shortfall of foreign direct investment, except that Western nations deliberately wants to ensure that no other African nation follow Ghana, and therefore implement certain policies that virtually curtail foreign direct investment.
That warn you ahead.
That warn you ahead. But looking at the situation you are in, now let's be minded that Africa is in a very good place in terms of asserting independence because of the geopolitical tension going on. So everybody wants a cake of Africa. That's why the U.S. high officials are visiting the continent. And for the West, Ghana represents something they will not want to lose. Given, although we have passed this law, they won't want to lose Ghana to maybe a more Eastern influence. Because if you look at the Chinese, they won't comment on either you have LGBTQ plus laws or whatever. And therefore, if the Western interests here will withdraw, it will leave the field virtually for those other interests. I'm not sure they are ready to take that gamble. So yes, it's not all gloom, but as a people, we must also stand up for certain values and certain things that we believe in. We can't always do the economic interests and so forth and so on. Sometimes sanctions may even work to your own good if it is imposed. That is, if you have a concrete program of how to address the consequences.
In fact, this morning I was reading an article. Russia in 2020, Russia debt to GDP was 55%.
Yes.
As of 2023, it's 21%. Yes. Meaning even in the midst of economic sanctions, they've managed to hold their own.
You see, if you look at Russia, with all the sanctions they've had, they are the largest supplier of arms to Africa. in terms of volume of arms.
Right.
All right. Before even the sanctions, the Chinese overtook them. But during the sanctions, although they are fighting wars, but they are still the largest supplier of arms to Africa. So sometimes it's all about we having a program. So for instance, you already have your program, Ghana Beyond Aid. Perhaps it's time to fast track it and achieve some little bit of independence within the international setting. That doesn't mean that we will not trade with anybody. We will still trade. But the only thing is that you want to trade and gain the advantage instead of just trading for consumption. So these are issues. Of course, as I said, we should not be
early days yet. now the bill is one step away from becoming a law. We're waiting for the president. But Honorable Bejwa, when Uganda passed a bill, the first reaction of the United States, for example, to say that we are imposing visa restriction on certain individuals of their parliaments. Are you expecting same?
No.
I mean, even before getting to the third reading of the bill, some behind the scenes issues had happened that tended to suggest that you guys were being watched.
Well, Uganda has, like my colleague mentioned, Uganda has their own law, and that law is so stringent as compared to ours. There's no death penalty in our law. I mean, ours.
But there's an imprisonment of 3 years.
Of course, if you are found to indulge yourself in that activity act, you should be in prison. Having said that, at the beginning of all this, when some of us put ourselves there, we had a backlash from some international organizations, some institutions, but we have gone past that. I have received all my visas, I mean, both from the U.S. Embassy and from UK. When I went...
Despite the fact that...
they explained to me
you
why
were a co-sponsor.
Yes, they explained to
and
me.
And it had nothing to do because...
That's what they claim, that it has nothing to do with that. So I don't have problem. Since they have explained to me that it has nothing to do with this, I'm okay with it. And my other colleagues has all equally received their visas, so they've traveled. I have traveled to the US, And so I am not expecting any sanction. I can tell you that there will not be any sanction. It is all propaganda. Ask yourself that in Hungary, that is in Europe, has laws against LGBT community. And that country is in Europe. What are they doing about it? Ghana has passed a law. Nigeria has passed this law. Uganda has passed this law. Is Uganda still there? Or the country of Uganda is no longer there? Things are completely off. We don't have a president, Museveni, and a vice president, the rest of the people are no longer there. I don't think there will be any sanction. These are all propaganda. This community, called LGBT community, are so strong. They are powerful in terms of finance, in terms of the media. Their presence is all over the place. But we should not say because their presence is all over the place, we should allow them to continue to do what they started in this country. I can tell you that when you go to our senior high schools now, children are being recruited with money, economic gains. They are recruiting people, forming clubs.
In the senior high
in the senior high schools. Just that we on the set, that I was giving some senior high school that they started. When we started this bill, parents came to us and said, look, let this bill go through. We want this bill passed. That's why there's overwhelming support for this bill across the nation. Now, if you have this support internally for a bill, a law that you have passed in Parliament, you have internal support. The president, I think he should.
So these schools that some are recruiting others to join the community. These schools have authorities there. Are the authorities aware? And they are not doing
If they are not aware, they will not have come to us. We've received letters from schools that says that, look, these groups, these young girls and boys are being recruited. They form clubs. They claim they go to class meeting. They give them 50 Ghana cedis, and that's what is being used to lure them into this activity. And so, for us now, even though you have leadership there, leadership cannot do anything because
there's no law.
There's no law. Now, our first law, that's the at 29, has to do with uncanon natural knowledge, which is just, and the definition of unnatural canon knowledge is a man, penetrating the anus of another man, penile penetration. What about a woman who is using, how do they call that machine? Something that,
Sex toys.
Sex toys. How about a woman who is doing that to her colleague female? Is it culturally right? Is it morally right? Is it Ghanaian? If it is not, then let's stop it.
So Ishmael, so on the global scale, you think we are receiving applause or condemnation?
Of course, you won't receive applause on the global stage because the way this Western media is controlled, you know that they will use information and sometimes misinformation to try to put pressure on you. So on the global stage, yes, you will receive applause from countries that also share the same view with you. So, for instance, maybe in Nigeria, people will jubilate Ghana has joined the club. In maybe Muslim-dominated countries, that is accepted. But for the big players, particularly the Western world, you won't receive an applause. You are rather going to be seen as going back on advances that have been made in terms of promoting human rights all these years. So it's not like we want to be applauded. It's more like what you think is good for you domestically. And that for as you are putting it out there, it takes away a little bit of you being considered an open society,
right,
where everybody can go into Ghana and have their own freedom, quote and unquote, because then you have taken away some group of people who are quite loud in terms of their control of strategic communication, their control of major media organizations. Right. So that's why you see BBC. There are so many things that have happened in Ghanaia's parliament.
But they didn't report.
Of course, you should understand. And you see, and the way they will report gives you the implication that this is a country going backwards instead of
going forward.
So
we're bringing the discussion to a close. But so what happens next now, Honorable?
Well, Elton, let me just draw your attention to the fact that this bill has gone through some changes. Initially, if you look at the title of the bill,
has changed as well.
Promotion of proper human sexual rights and Ghanaian family values.
The Ghanaian is out.
No, not only Ghanaian. Now it's not Human Sexual Rights and Family Value Act. So promotion of is gone proper. Now we've left the human sexual rights and family values. So we are limiting the right to sexual rights. So nobody should confuse us that we are talking about human right. We are talking about human sexual. What is your human sexual right? That's what we are talking about. And what is the Ghanaian family value? What are the values and culture norms of Ghanaians? Now, you also mentioned, which I want to bring this to fore, that you mentioned that the Attorney General, Honorable Godfrey Dame, said he cannot
advise the
president. He was the same person who brought amendment to this original bill. Now, this bill was 20. Tell him today, and if he's listening to it, he should listen to me carefully, that you, Godfrey Dame, you were with us. You were the same person who preferred amendment to this law, that we brought this law to some level of appreciation. Things that he brought to us that, look, we should look at some of the issues concerning human rights. We took them out. So if he doesn't have the final version of this law, he should not talk. He should look at the final version before he advises the president. And I believe he will look at the final version and he will advise the president to pass this law.
So and what's next? Now that you are the president.
So the next is that
when is the bill moving for Parliament?
Our law says that as soon as we pass the law, the clerk of Parliament will have to send it to government printer. The government printer will now put it on what we call it, that sheet. Is it stencil sheet?
Yeah.
And then it will come back from the government printer to the clerk of Parliament. Clerk of Parliament will see whether it conforms with whatever we pass in the House before they write officially to the president. Now, as they write officially to the president has 7 days to assent to it. After 7 days, if he will not assent to it,
you have to report back to Parliament.
He has
within 14 days.
Within 14
and give reasons why.
And give reasons why. And those reasons will be incorporated in this, either for the changes, or we have 2/3 of members of Parliament who, if we are able to garner the 2/3, and I know that only 1 or 2 people will not sign, but the rest of the people will sign. 2/3, if you like, don't sign, it's whether you win your seat again in Parliament, because Ghanaians will come after you. Now,
so if he doesn't sign,
it will come back to us.
You will use the procedure in Parliament
not only
to have it
constitutional
2/3 of 4 MPs to vote for, and it becomes law.
It becomes law. Pro bono.
Ishmael,
it's a matter between where Africa wants to be and where the world wants Africa to be. As we are speaking, the proponent of this bill, and of course proponent of birth control and all these things, they're in a major crisis of human population. Yeah. One of the reasons they are engaged in Africa is you have the full population.
Right.
You are growing. All other regions, of course. I always say in Africa, when you get married by 11 a.m., by 4 p.m., we ask you, are you pregnant? Because you are supposed to give birth. So the point is that what's the future of Africa? If what is giving Africa a lot of resource and power is the human population, then the title of the bill makes sense in that you are not banning LGBTQ+, you are promoting, as it were. Perhaps
now promotion is even out of the long title.
You see, okay, fine, but it's also, you can twist it like this. If you turn it like this, then it doesn't have to even deal with LGBTQ+. So it's about communication. So I'm saying that, okay, I want to properly define my people, what sexual right is. That is what it is. But if we don't take the lead in communicating, that's why I said that one of the problems with Africa is the lack of global media giants, as it were. Government are not supporting, even the private ones, to grow to that level where they can shape global public opinion. So, for instance, if you look at the Arab world, with Al Jazeera, it is now very difficult for the West to control the information that other people control, because then you can just see what they are doing. The Chinese are coming out with their own thing. So, unless we're able to get to that level where we have maybe joy so strong, so powerful, we will have to battle some of this information kind of thing. So maybe you are trying to do something else, but the interpretation is being different because you don't. So, but having said that, I think that the where it has gotten to,
there's no turning back.
There's no turning back, and we must all prepare for
whatever the president. Let me pick some social media comments, and then we'll wrap it up on this subject, and then bring on the Attorney General. So, Black Handsome says, passing an anti-LGBT bill in Ghana is criticized for infringing on basic human rights, particularly the right to individual freedom and protection from discrimination. It raises concerns about fostering an intolerant environment, hindering progress towards inclusivity and equality. Such legislation can contribute to stigmatization and jeopardize the well-being of the LGBT community. We'll pick more comments on social media as we move on. Another one says, another very bad example of how not to do politics. Now, all Ghana problems will be solved by attacking the gays, the most clear way of brainwashing the population. People need schools, hospital jobs with good wages. Instead, give them a ban on a minority who doesn't disturb anyone. Now, Ghana will be happy. And this is coming from Vicky01. That's the name Vicky provided. Albert says whether you support it or not, it has been passed. It is either you abide by it or bounce out. Even in the US, there are pro-anti-LGBTQ. Once again, Sam Joy wins. And this is coming from Albert. More comments, and then we'll wrap up the show here. Nungwa, Bernard Boy. So among all the problems the country is facing, it is the sexual choices of the citizens that our leaders are concerned about. Kolebu Renal Dialysis Unit is closed down because of 4 million Ghana cedi, but this is what our leaders think must be done. And he says, Bibini shaking my head. And of course, we'll pick a few other. And then Augustus, the last one I'll pick because of time, says Sam George is a winner. So there's divergent views over there. But Honorable, so before I let you go, your final words, so you continue.
Well, let me use this medium to thank especially our media partners who have supported us throughout this journey, especially the multimedia group. You've supported us heavily, even though sometimes we thought that you are not for us, but you have shown clearly.
We are always neutral.
You are neutral. I know
in
you are
matters
neutral.
of this nature.
Yeah, so thank you so much. All other media houses. The bill has been passed, Elton. This bill has been passed. Ghanaians have. This is the only bill in Ghana or in our parliament over the last period that I've seen Ghanaians supported us as parliament. It got to a point where we thought that it was political bill. Some people even thought that it was an NDC bill. But eventually we've seen that the bill, cut across. I can tell you that the former majority leader, preferred a lot of amendment. He shaped this bill. In fact, he's one of the person I would do out my heart for. In the House, this guy stood up. Even the last day, he said, look, make sure this my amendment passes. So, Honorable Chairman, sir, you've done very. And there was just another minister,
former Minister for Environment.
The guy defined, sex with his, scientific knowledge. He's a medical doctor. And so this clearly shows that it is not a partisan bill at all. It was a bipartisan. I mean, both sides of the House supported it. And so Ghanaians, we thank you so much. We know that the president will assent to it. Mr. President, please assent to our bill for us. Don't listen to the G18 people. They thought that the bill will not be passed. It has been passed. Yours is just to assent to it, to show that you are really a man of your own and a Ghanaian.
The Member of Parliament for Whole West, Emmanuel Bejo, and of course, International Relations expert, Dr. Ishmael Kolobo. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And this is the pulse here on Joy News. My name is Elton Brobe. We'll take a short break. We shall be back with Attorney General and Minister for Justice, Godfred Yeboah-Dame. You're welcome back to the pulse here on Joy News and around the world. Your comments and questions are welcome via our social media handles. Now, let's move to some other stories we have for you this Thursday afternoon. The Attorney General, Godfred Yeboah-Dame, says he will not cancel the president to endorse a law that infringes people's rights. He spoke in an interview with Morning Show host Kojo Jansen hours before the passage of the Proper Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill 2024. He's also raising concerns about the rising tide of judgment debt lawsuit that has flooded his office in this exclusive interview.
Trillion Ghana cedis. I'm not sure I've even heard that number said out loud before, but the president certainly said it during the State of the Nation address. He says that the Attorney General, through his actions of defending the state against judgment debt claims, has saved Ghana 10 trillion Ghana cedis. That's some 1 trillion United States dollars. Yeah. And of course, there was a reaction to this. But then the president said the evidence is all there. Well, that's why we are here, to find out from the Attorney General himself what evidence there is to back a saving of 10 trillion Ghana cedis. Thanks for having us. So let's jump right into it.
Right.
Sikano Wahi.
Well, I think they're all there. They're all made out in claims made by various people, litigants, against the government of Ghana. And indeed, it's very important to note that these sums were saved in furtherance of our constitutional rule and Article 88 to the Constitution. If you remember, when I assumed office, I made a commitment to a nation that the same zeal with which private legal practitioners contest claims against their clients is what I also bring to the office. And so, to go straight to the point, 10 trillion Ghana cedis.
Yeah.
Now you see this order for Ganache Nasai issued in the High Court of Justice, Commercial Division, Accra. And what is the sum here? And if you can just read the order.
Right. I'm looking at 10, oh my goodness, so many commas.
Yes.
10 trillion, 331 billion,
Yes.
841 million,
Yes.
859,411 Ghana cedis, and 20 pesos. Let's not
Right.
forget the pesos.
Sure.
So what case is this?
So that is African Automobile Limited against Ministry of Employment, Manpower Development, and the Attorney General.
Someone
And of course,
sued.
by the description of the ministry, you would note that clearly it's a Ministry of Old, because
Right.
under the government of President Akufo-Addo, you do not have Ministry of Manpower, Employment, Ministry of Employment and Manpower Development. You have Ministry of Employment. So these are judgment debts that were claimed against the government of Ghana way back. Of course, by dint of my role as Attorney General, I've had to defend them. So on the 26th day of April 2021, an order for Ganache Nasai, implying that an amount in the sum of 10 trillion 331 billion 841 million Ghana cedis had been ordered to be paid by the government of Ghana. And you see the amounts here stated here, that the banks against which the sums were supposed to be paid from. The accounts are accounts being held by the Bank of Ghana, Head Office, Ghana Commercial Bank, Head Office, and Consolidated Bank, Ghana Limited. So right after this order was served on us, we were quite alarmed. And I assembled the whole team here. I gave them further directions on it. And this was, as I said, 26 April 2021. So on 31st May 2021, the High Court set aside the ordered that the sum be not paid. Now, so you see, this is the judgment of the High Court.
Right.
The ruling of the High Court, 31st May 2021. And the concluding parts are most instructive. It says, it is therefore ordered that the Ganache proceedings regarding the applicant's indebtedness should, okay, so in this one, the subsequently pursuant to the challenge that was made by the Attorney General, revised the figure downwards to 3 trillion Ghana cedis. Now, after the revision, then an action was filed by us to set aside the entire judgment on the basis of fraud, that the government of Ghana was not owing any sum at all. So this is it. So indeed, it is correct to say that 10 trillion Ghana cedis was claimed against the government of Ghana, and 10 trillion Ghana cedis has been avoided. And that is just one suit.
Right.
Now you go to many other suits, if I may.
If we can finish
Right.
with this particular one,
Sure.
because I mean, I've never heard of such a thing.
Yes, it is.
So walk us through as much as you can
The
about
process,
this case.
yes.
When was this judgment awarded against the government of Ghana?
Right.
And what are the facts?
Right. So the judgment itself was awarded in 2011 under the SFA NDC administration 2011. And it went all the way to Court of Appeal, was affirmed again by the Court of Appeal. And then the processes to set aside judgment commenced in our time, in our administration. I mean,
So this all happened in Ghanaian courts?
Yes, Ghanaian courts.
10 trillion
10
was
trillion.
awarded against
Yes.
a party
Yes, and the law
suing
firm,
the government
yes,
of
the law
Ghana.
firm is reputable as this legal. If you are familiar with law practice in Ghana, it's a law firm that I think is headed by Professor Abuchi. So the lawyers are there to verify. So all these claims are there.
What were they claiming 10 trillion for?
Well, for some supply of vehicles and equipment to the government of Ghana way back in the 1990s. And of course, so claims arising out of breach of contract. And that is actually a reason why I have been compelled to get Parliament to enact a law which seeks to amend the Contract Act by which the payment of compound interest is prohibited against the government of Ghana. Because before I assumed the reins as Attorney General, indeed, I observed a trend for various public officers to the process of compound interest, actually inflict unnecessary judgment debts against the government of Ghana. So remember the case of NDK against the Attenjura,
Yes.
which I again applied to the Supreme Court for an order stating that the sum of 79 million Ghana cedis paid by the government of Ghana was sufficient and therefore should be declared as full and final payment. And the government was relieved from the obligation of paying the sum of 1.27 billion Ghana cedis. If you remember, it was reported widely by your station, Daily Graphic and all that. The sum in question was a paltry 268,000 Ghana cedis, 268,000 Ghana cedis.
That was the original amount awarded.
Sum
right.
in 2009 was 268,000 Ghana cedis. But by the process of computation of compound interest, the sum increased to 1.3 billion Ghana cedis. And after an amount of 79 million Ghana cedis had been paid by the government of Ghana, NDK was still pursuing government of Ghana for payment of 1.27 billion Ghana cedis. And I made the application to the Supreme Court that on grounds of equity and what have you, the sum paid by the government of Ghana should be awarded as, or should be held by the court as having fully satisfied the judgment debt. And that's what actually motivated me to lay before Parliament the Contract Amendment Act. And Parliament, thankfully, passed the law July last year. And I believe the President has assented to it. So now, no public officer is permitted to engage in a transaction in which the interest arising from a breach of the government's obligation will be calculated on the basis of compound interest. It will just be simple interest, because indeed, when I was conducting the NDK case, I realized that if there had been a computation of interest rate at simple interest, the amount paid would have just been a paltry sum. And the Supreme Court actually held, pursuant to my application, that the sum owed by government of Ghana, or that sum outstanding, was only 14,000 Ghana cedis.
Wow.
Compare 14,000 Ghana cedis to 1.27 billion Ghana cedis.
So in this
case, 10 trillion Ghana cedis.
What was the original amount awarded that started gathering the compound interest?
The original amount was far, far lower. The original amount was about 971,000 Ghana cedis.
Less than a million Ghana cedis?
Yes, from 1997 to 1999. And afterwards, I think that so the process of judgment debt for me had become a conduit for milking the state, had become a conduit for necessarily inflicting financial hardships on the state. And some people had more or less permitted it to be an enterprise. And we saw various judgments of the Supreme Court between 2012 and 2016 reflecting such a tendency. And so I'm not surprised at all.
Well, I mean...
but that's just one case, 10 trillion.
And in fact...
walk through the other cases. That's why I said that indeed.
To wrap on this case, if you don't mind, what is the current state of things? I know you've got the Garniche order quashed.
Yes.
But is the matter concluded? Is there room for appeal? Could we still end up having to pay? Yes.
So we've set aside, we've applied for the judgment to set aside on the basis of fraud at the High Court, and pending that, no action or step can be taken to execute it. And I believe that clearly the High Court will uphold the action that we have commenced. Because
but that's no not yet done.
Well, the people affected, those who are claiming the 10 trillion, recently only filed their defense.
Right.
So let's see.
I'm just asking these just to be sure that we've actually saved this money already, or that we will save it at the end of this process.
On account of the principles established in the NDK case, clearly, this sum will not be paid. How justifiable is it that the amount which by 1999 was 979,000 Ghana cedis now should balloon to 10 trillion and people should be paid? And I think previously, people were encouraged, motivated to engage in such acts because you find public officers, whether from Ministry of Finance or the Office of Attenjura, even sitting down to negotiate with them and all that, encouraging such negotiations. In my time, with all respect, such practice will never prevail.
Although government of Ghana, between 2017 and 2021, have still paid out some $300 odd million worth of judgment debts.
Yeah, of course. Clearly, judgment debts arising as a result of various situations cannot be avoided. And indeed, I was earlier on explaining to you that if a policeman perhaps engages in some act of brutality against a citizen, the person will go to court and sue the Attenjura. In such an instance, there are many instances where I find on my table courts awarding sums of over 400,000 Ghana cedis, and what have you. In cases that you cannot use your legal ingenuity to orchestrate a defeat of the applicant. And I think that indeed, from the perspective of law and fairness, if a person has suffered genuine, has suffered genuinely as a result of officers of states engaging in negligence and on other tortious activities, it will be inequitable for you to say that such a person should not be paid. So yes, there may be instances where a person clearly will be owed a claim, and that should be verified. But I'm talking about situations where dubious, unwarranted claims, as this, have gone through the courts and prevailed. And those are actually the huge cases that bring a burden on the taxpayer. Are
there many more such cases where compound interest has turned the number into something astronomical?
Yes. I told you about how the Supreme Court quashed the payment of compound interest in the NDK case. And in the NDK case, it was actually remarkable. When I finished concluding the matter, I received a call from Marita Brew congratulating me. It's a matter of record. She had called me a number of times, sent messages, congratulating me on it. And then I called her back and she said, yes, because the matter that had been of concern to them, they were struggling or they were finding it difficult to deal with it. And therefore, she found it quite remarkable that I had been able to put it to conclusion and all that. These are matters of record, messages and all. So then we have this one, another African automobile matter. There's an action that was pursued by Sorry and Co. Sorry at Law.
Yes.
It's a matters of record. Sorry at Law. You know who Sorry at Law.
Yes, Albert Sorry.
And
his law firm.
And you can verify. You see the entry of judgment here. What is it for?
Oh my goodness, these big numbers.
582 billion.
582 billion
Ghana cedis.
1,748,751 cedis. No pesos this time.
Right.
What's this about?
So again, a claim for some breach of contract by the government of Ghana, and this is what they allege was owed by the government of Ghana. Ultimately, when an application was made to the High Court in 2020, 10 February 2020, the court suspended the execution of the judgment and actually held that we could issue a writ to set aside the entire action on the basis of fraud. So you say application is accordingly granted and the execution aforementioned is hereby suspended pending the hearing of the matter. And so not a dime has
So
been
when
paid.
you say that these actions are being set aside on the basis of fraud,
yes,
what you're actually saying is that some people in government before you colluded to have these judgment debts awarded when there was really no case for such payments to be made.
Well, I think that it is actually as a result of, one, vigilance, lack of vigilance on the part of public officers, or sheer complicity in the process of ensuring that the state is ripped off with hard-earned purse. And I say so for the reasons that were given by the Court of Appeal and its judgment in the Woyome matter. You find the criminal matter instituted against Alfred Woyome. The Court of Appeal given a judgment on the submission of no case that had been made by Alfred Woyome. No, so Alfred Woyome had been prosecuted, and the High Court had eventually acquitted Alfred Woyome. And the state purported to appeal against the acquittal of Alfred Woyome. And the state clearly heard that the Court of Appeal heard that the state had no case at all, because the state itself had, through its processes, orchestrated for Alfred Woyome to profit from the judgment debt and turn around to prosecute only him, leaving out the public officers in question. And the public officers were officers or officers at Tangier, as well as the Minister of Justice. So, if I may quote from the judgment to the Court of Appeal in 2016, 10th March 2016. You see, this is one. And this actually it's a panel of three. Each of them gave an opinion. I'm just quoting from only the opinion of Justice L.L. Mensah. The others were even worse. Justice L.L. Mensah said, indeed, in the instant case, the trial judge should have terminated the trial and upheld the submission of no case, because the evidence of virtually all the prosecution witnesses including PW1, whose name is there, an officer of the Ministry of Finance. Through PW,
if its name is there, you can say it
through
for us.
PW9. No, but I don't want to be misled. She's actually a lawyer.
Right.
But in terms of those who orchestrated, actually some other officers.
Right.
And I know here, with the evidence of the PW3, PW7, PW8, and PW9. When I say PW, it's prosecution witnesses.
Yeah.
That I've highlighted, all go to bolster the defense of the respondent. So imagine a situation where the state puts up a prosecution and all their witnesses were supporting the case of the accused person. Clearly meant to fail. Then it says here, at page 8, it says, once the whole armada of the government of Ghana, legal, financial, administrative, technical, ministerial, or consultancy machinery combined together to act on the purported misorientation of the respondent and found the claim to be impeccable, the respondent cannot be convicted of a transaction which the state had blessed all the way. And indeed, you will see that the officers of state who actually blessed Woyome's transaction were named specifically in this judgment. At page 7, it says that the then Honorable Attorney General and her deputy, Honorable Bachnodu, who between them wrote 4 letters in support of the respondent's claim.
So that would be Betty Mould Idrisu at the time.
Precisely, did not only use their ordinary care and judgment, but they fell on their legal professional expertise to assess the claims of the respondent. And they did this not in isolation, but with the advice of 2 other legally professional brains in the persons of Paul Asmenu, head of legal for the Ministry of Finance, and Samuel Nekwetete, Chief State Attorney.
So you're suggesting there's a pattern that
yes,
runs through these cases?
The question that ought to be asked is that, how can a group of people in government, through this judgment, as has been affirmed in this judgment, actually machinate for a person who is not a public officer to have access to the state's hard-earned money, at that time the equivalent of about 25 million euros. And then subsequently, if it emerges that the whole transaction was fraught with fraud and irregularity, they purport then to prosecute the third party, who is not a public officer, and left themselves out, and let the public officers out. Carefully did so. Clearly.
I get it.
So I think that yes.
If I may, I mean, with respect, you are in office today, and you are showing us evidence of cases where you have had judgments overturned and saved money, as you describe it. But you see, in the examples given, it was made possible by people in offices such as yours, right? Who's to say that a year or 2 after you leave office, we're not going to find out that there are perhaps a couple of $100 million that were handed out to people in similar circumstances,
unless
with
perhaps,
you as the goalkeeper letting the goals in?
Well, there has not been any instance of a claim against the state passing through this office which was not contested. Unless in cases of, say, a police officer, as I said, a police officer beating a civilian, or some clear case of, say, my driver, officer of the Office of Attorney General, using an office vehicle, runs down a person. Are you going to say because you're Attorney General, you're not going to ask or permit the person to be punished and all that? But there has not been any instance of the state using its armada of government machinery, as was held in this Woyome case, facilitating the payment of any judgment debt. I can say that with all the confidence I can share.
Now, you have several cases here.
And indeed, it is also worthy to note that when the MPP left office in 2009, January 2009, NDC made similar noises. The same officers here who have been mentioned, the Attorney General and the Deputy and all that, shouted on various platforms that they're going to prosecute the MPP administration for corruption. I was the one who conducted the first criminal trial when the MPP was in opposition. A question was AJ, tried for allegedly stealing rice over 1.5 billion Ghana cedis and all. At the end of the day, the prosecution fell flat after the state had called 70 witnesses. No case at all could be sustained. And the same story could be told of all other cases mounted against officers of the SWA Kufuor administration. You talk about Asamoah Barton, the prosecution of Asamoah Barton and his wife, prosecution of Akutos, the late Akutos, and all. Talk about even the Ghana 50 prosecution, which they made so much noise about. Not a shred of evidence was laid. So I'm used to NDC making all these noises. Now, yes. The opposition, they're crying foul over a lot of things that clearly do not amount to any criminality whatsoever.
There are some
they're making the noise. They're making the noise. When they can't, they'll prosecute. Similar noises were made by their people. I think that the nation must really be able to distinguish between light and day. To distinguish between night and day. I mean, I think when it comes to good governance, the record of the NDC cannot match up to any standard at all.
There are some who might say that your administration is pretty much doing the same thing with cases like Opuni and Dr. Atoforsen, where lots of noise has been made.
Right.
Now these people are being taken through court, and some of the cases, in one case, the thing has dragged endlessly, doesn't seem to be any end in sight. Looks like there was a lot of noise at the beginning, but the result is just not showing itself.
Yeah, but the case,
is it not the same thing?
No, but the case is staying too long in court. That does not amount to saying that the persons have been acquitted or that the prosecution was frivolous. The frivolity or the legitimacy of prosecution can be established only upon the conclusion of the matter. And indeed, I'm very confident of a conviction in most of the cases we're talking about. So far, all the major cases that they have been conclusion to, we've had success in them. Even more contentious or more complex matters, treasons, murder, and what have you. What about simple cases as fraud and all. And that is why they are resorting to all these machinations of appealing and halting the judicial process. I have the benefit of experience. And again, I will follow my experience. When I was in private practice, I never resorted to all of these gymnastics that have been resorted to by lawyers. I conducted a CJ trial within about 10 months. The trial court acquitted him on 6 out of 8 counts at the submission of no case stage. I felt aggrieved. I appealed to the Court of Appeal. Court of Appeal presided over by Justice Apau and considered by other judges, Senor Jamafe and I think Mariam Owusu. Mariam Owusu was actually the president of the panel, and then considered by Justice Apau and Senor Jamafe as the panel members. Acquitted him on the other 2 within a period of about 16 months. The entire trial had terminated. And so if you are a practitioner, you believe in the strength of your case, there's no way to be resorting to all these unnecessary gymnastics.
You have quite a pile of cases here.
Yes.
And
so I'll quickly run through them for you.
Well, without you having to run through them
No, to show that indeed the savings that the president announced were actually an underestimation. The president grossly underestimated it. And it was actually my doing, because every minister has a responsibility of bringing to the president's attention the work that the minister has done. And in presenting my report, I deliberately understated the account, just not to raise unnecessary eyebrows and to be unnecessary sensational. But if you go through, 10 trillion is just arising in a single case. If you go through, the savings are actually over 14 billion. 14 trillion. Yes, I can refer to this matter, China Jinlen, which the Supreme Court set aside only last year. The judgment that year, if you look at the figure here, originally, and then all the time, Ganashir, it was in the High Court of Justice, I think in Kumasi or so. The transport minister actually came here and made a lot of noise about it because it affected his account and all. And we took it up and compared to situations where ministers and the SWA administration would team up and orchestrate and facilitate judgment dates. It is this amount of 352 billion. So that the figures are even dizzy. You can't even 352 million Ghana cedis. 352,662,144.41 pesos. And then an amount of almost $1 billion. $988 million, 294,313. That is it. So almost $1 billion plus 325 billion Ghana cedis. So the Supreme Court again in 2022, after 2023, in the conclusion, says the application before the court that we have quashed the ruling given was expressly to set aside the Ghana share order and without prejudice making the controversial setting aside order. And they granted the order quashing all these proceedings. And interestingly, in this judgment, the court actually held that, as we contended, that the persons who had mounted the action even had no capacity whatsoever. And the identities could not be made out. A person who was a foreigner holding a power of attorney, which had not been properly notarized, and who had even died later on in the course of the trial, and therefore could not have given another power of attorney to another person to pursue the trial, was allegedly pursuing this matter. And the court said, no, our contention was right. And therefore, if they want to mount the claim, they must come and properly establish their authority. To date, they have not come forward.
For all these cases, I have only one question.
And then you talk about the numerous international arbitration cases, which the state also has enjoyed remarkable success. And I think that it's a matter of record. Yeah. For the past 2 years, the rest of Ghana has actually been chasing me to come and give a lecture to their LLM people on international arbitration. I have not had the time to do so. I think this is our because indeed they are quite impressed by the remarkable rate of success and just want us to enlighten them on what Ghana is doing right. Yeah. Now, $300 million was claimed by a company, Cassius Mining. That was refused by the Permanent Court of Arbitration, pursuant to objections that we raised. I have a copy of the judgment here, and if you just would permit me, this is it, the 91-page award of the arbitral tribunal. Now you look at 300 million US dollars. Yes. So page 7 says, okay, this is actually even under one for 60 million USD. The 300 million was also there, and eventually was suspended. And today, I think the people, after the denial of the original claim, pursued another international arbitration, and we raised various objections and all. I think the ruling should have come in either today or, if not today, maybe tomorrow. And this one that I have in my hand is for at least 60 million USD. It says, finally, look at page 7. The claimant seeks an order awarding Everyway, the Beijing Everyway company, the traffic system, damages which it has incurred as a result of the aforementioned breaches of a treaty, amounting to an estimate not lower than $55 million. At the time of this claim, the interest component had shot the amount out to over $60 million. The conclusion, which you see here, after we had raised all the objections to the inapplicability of the treaty and whatever, the court said, for the reasons... Which
year was this?
Oh, this was just last year.
Right.
It's just last year, or last 2 years. Let me see. I mean, most of these cases are from 2021, when I assumed the office. Right. So it's January 2023, last year. It says, for the reasons set out above, the Tribunal A upholds the respondent's objections to the Tribunal's jurisdiction and finds that it has no jurisdiction to decide the claimant's claim in this arbitration. And they invite the parties to directly confer on the issue of cost. We actually decided not to pursue any cost at all. The most important thing was for us to win and to throw the appeal out, which we did.
All right. Now, for all of these cases, I really have only one question.
Right.
Are they all concluded, or are there opportunities for appeals? Could any of these rulings be overturned, or have you actually saved us these amounts?
Yeah, most of them have been concluded, and I'm very sure that the ones that are not concluded are actually the ones that we have issued writ to set aside the original judgment on the basis of fraud. And indeed, the court has, in consequence of our writ, issued orders suspending the execution of the judgment or setting aside the order for Ghana Share Nasai, implying that the payment cannot be made at all. And I'm very confident that on the basis of all the reasons I've advanced, the claims no doubt to be defeated.
Right.
Yeah, in one of them, the 10 trillion one, our view is that the amount owed is only about 56,000 Ghana cedis or so. If at all, that's what we paid.
Well, we will certainly go through all of these documents with our cameras for the benefit of our audience.
And the lawyers are there to verify. I've surely you mentioned law firms who are pursuing them and all that. So,
before we wrap up, a couple of updates, if you may. Another area in which you've been commended is the number of prosecutions you have managed to put under your belt in the area of Galamsey. The criticism, however, is that we are not seeing the kingpins, the people who are funding these, you know, small fry, if you will, to go into the pits and dig. Why not? Why haven't we seen any kingpins locked up?
I think you are. Hitherto, the noise was that Galamsey activities are being funded by Chinese citizens. Is that not correct?
Yes, that has
and the
been
major
one of them.
campaign was who? Mentioned as who?
You mean Aisha Huang, the recently...
Precisely. And where is Aisha Huang now?
But that's just one person.
No, hold on. I'm saying that you are seeing the kingpins being thrown into jail. Aisha Huang has been convicted after coming to the country. There was the case that we mounted against Aisha was actually one of the most difficult ones. There was no direct evidence of Aisha Huang on a mining site. Nonetheless, everybody knew Aisha Huang was engaged in Galamsey activities. It tells you that she was actually operating behind the scenes, funding people. We had to actually dig into her arsenal, chase up evidence relating to writs that had been issued against her by various persons who had alleged that she had encroached on her land, on their lands and all that. And then brought up all these witnesses from Bepo Tintin and Bogoso and other places and all to mount the prosecution. It was actually an overwhelming circumstantial evidence. You know the rule in circumstantial evidence where it irresistibly points in one direction and the necessary inference can be made. And that is why Aisha Huang was convicted. Before then, there had been the jailing of various Chinese nationals by the Takwa Circuit Court. We had 2 Chinese nationals thrown in for 25 years. Well, the law, current legal regime requires that if a foreigner is engaged in such activities, the minimum penalty is or punishment is 20 years, and for a Ghanaian, 15 years minimum. And then there was also a conviction by a Takwa Circuit Court of 2 Chinese nationals and some Ghanaians, if you remember, where the punishment existing under the SY regime was imposed, implying that they could be fined and all. And they were fined and allowed to go. And I actually had to instruct for the filing of an application for certiorari in the Secondary High Court for it to be quashed. So fortunately, National Security, National Security rounded them up. Fortunately, when the application was filed, and then the judgment was passed accordingly, and now they're all in jail.
Now, because you mentioned Aisha,
So that was the Attorney General Minister for Justice, Godfrey Yeboah-Dame, in that interview with my colleague, Kwadwo Jansen. The rest of the interview will be in you in subsequent bulletins. But let me pick a bit of a reaction and then we'll get into your election headquarters, because in the studio right now is the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Mustafa Bande. Mustafa is here to walk us through the process towards the decision on the running mate for the NDC flag bearer, John Dramani Mahama, for election 2024. Mustafa, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And you want to react to what we've heard from the Attorney General before we zoom into the very reason why you are here this afternoon.
Well, I think in brief, the exercise the Attorney General is engaged in with the full backing and endorsement of His Excellency the President is frivolous.
Why do you say so?
Unnecessary and uncalled for. Because it's actually a mockery that an Attorney General should be celebrated because you've, been able to stay a judgment or convince a court to set aside a judgment, which is a temporary measure. It does not conclusively deal with the matter.
In some cases, the cases are off.
But we know that fundamentally it gives the applicant or the litigant an opportunity to come back. Strategically, legally. A legal strategy would tell you that the person litigating the matter will time and come back. And so if you have been able to do that, you compile figures, come to us and say that celebrate my government, celebrate my Attorney General because he have saved, the country some money. I think it's unnecessary and uncalled for. It's simple populism.
But you will be condemning him if it was the other way around.
The other way around. But, I mean, we know that this government is, involved in a lot of things that needlessly will give us judgment debt, whether you like it or not. Was it not the same Attorney General that was in government when they were collapsing banks? What about that? We have senior members of the Akufo-Addo regime and his own family members fronting judgment debts, and yet they want us to celebrate them for setting aside judgment.
Are there examples you can provide?
Gabi is one. Gabi's law firm
Which is
actually wrote to the finance minister to pay judgment debts.
for work done by an entity.
At the time he was writing, did he believe that it was a collusion? Was it a collusion? The Attorney General is trumpeting that legal opinions and concerns by the public is noise. Such, an arrogant posturing of a minister who thinks that opinions, concerns from the public about conduct of the business of government is noise. Really?
It's
not his fault.
The collapse of the bank, has there been established
we all know
of any wrongdoing?
We all know that there's a lot of causing financial loss to the state. The banks were collapsed needlessly. People lost jobs. We all know that. You see, we are not, when you cause a negligent loss of money from state coffers, it doesn't manifest in a day. It takes time to manifest. And I'm saying that the cousin of His Excellency President Akufo-Addo, who is known as the de facto prime minister of the Akufo-Addo regime, actually wrote through his law firm to his other brother at the finance ministry to pay judgment debt.
For work done by
whether it's work done or not. At the time Gabi was writing that opinion, did he believe that it was a collusion? Or he actually thought that the person deserves some judgment debt? And so, if anybody apart from Gabi should write a similar opinion, then it's collusion in the eyes of the Attorney General and in the mind of himself. When it is not a family member of Akufo-Addo writing to justify a judgment debt, and any other lawyer does same, it's a collusion, isn't it? He talks about how NDC was in power and made noise about somebody and he prosecuted the case. Is that not the same thing he's doing in Opuni matter? They are seeking to just use the court to jail people for political cards. And that is unfortunate. That is very unfortunate. If you want to measure the misconduct, public misconduct of this government, reckless termination of contracts, dealings with people that will bring judgment debts in the future, is unprecedented.
But again, on the matter of the Opuni case, I'm sure if he's innocent, the court will establish that.
So the Attorney General should wait for the court. The process of determining the finality of a legal matter is a court. Right. It is not for an Attorney General to either make an intervention or go to the court and set aside. Setting aside a judgment is not a conclusive avenue to redress. It's not conclusive. The person can at all moments come back to the court in another forum to have the matter litigated. So when you have set aside a judgment, don't, out of seeking for populism, trying to hide from public accountability, go and cook figures and say that we should celebrate you for that. Nobody will celebrate the Attorney General and his president for setting aside judgment, because that is frivolous. That in itself does not deal with the matter. And I know that a cousin of the president, whose law firm was justifying judgment debt, was writing and relying on facts. And we should go and peruse the facts other than looking at the procedure or the mechanism.
Mustafa, thank you very much on that. And Mustafa Bande is the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. He's in the studio to walk us through the process towards the, I don't know whether to use the word, the endorsement of the party's running mate for election 2024. And that's exactly what he's here to do. So Mustafa, when we spoke on Tuesday, you indicated that you had opened your doors for lobbying. I don't know whether you've been lobbied for this, perhaps the second most important job in the NDC as we head towards the elections.
Well, so this, like I said, this is a season for us, the executives. I mean, we are obviously the kingmakers, so you have to lobby if you want to be a running mate. And I must say, on a more serious note, that the number of people who have expressed interest, including people who are not politically known,
The number of people who have expressed interest in partnering the former president.
Traditional leaders, society-conserved individuals who believe that this is the time for them to partner with the party to give hope to Ghanaians is quite amazing.
And who are these individuals?
Well, a lot of them. You know some of the names, a lot of them. And I'm just saying that...
No, I'm more interested in those who are outside of politics.
It's amazing because, given the position that I sit in, I should be the one mentioning anybody's name because I would be giving leads to who... The president has tied a rope on his envelope and brought it to the general secretary. We are not opening it until we have that 7th meeting. So me, myself, I don't know what is in the envelope, but I do know.
No, but if you don't open it, how then are you available to be lobbied?
Yeah, but I do. They will lobby. They know that we are the executive. They know that on the 7th is the D-Day. So you will lobby. If you don't lobby, your name will not make it up to the list. But these individuals hold an impeccable public record, high level of integrity. And I did say yesterday that there is a gap in our governance today. The position of vice president have been deprived by the current vice president. And in fact, when you mention a vice president in the eyes of a lot of young Ghanaians now, it's a mockery. And what comes in their mind is very unfortunate. They believe that the current vice president is not sincere. They believe that they have a cause to believe that the current vice president is not honest. They have a cause to believe that the current vice president was used for all the political wrong reasons. And then
rewarded with a flag bearer?
Say that again?
And then rewarded with a flag bearer?
Well, whether he was rewarded or he wasn't rewarded, the most important thing is that the title of vice president, as far as we sit here today, comes with some sentiments of disgrace and reproach by the conduct of the current vice president. Ghanaians believe that he's been used to lie to the public, to deceive the public. He actually held public lectures, giving hope to Ghanaians, telling Ghanaians that his pedigree was a solution to our problem, telling Ghanaians that his competence was what would do the magic, telling Ghanaians that his coming on board was a finality to all the economic challenges that we face because he was capable. Only for him to be given an opportunity, and he turns up to be the most disgraceful, the most incompetent, the vice president, the head of economic management team, who gave Ghanaians the worst economic performance in the history of our country.
Nevertheless, so the MPP, they have absolute confidence in him. In him, they'll be able
but they are beneficiaries from his mess. They used him as a weapon to deceive Ghanaians. So they will be confident. But Ghanaians are not happy. The people of Ghana are not happy. And so people who voted for President Akufo-Addo in 2016 voted largely because they have sold a fake goods to the people of Ghana, and the marketer and the seller of that fake good was Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who held public lectures to tell Ghanaians that he was competent. All the deceptive promises that Nana Akufo gave Ghanaians, apart from the one that he said in Tree, all other policies Nana Akufo chained out was being told to this the people of Ghana by Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia.
So what kind of running mates are you bringing on board?
So currently, as we speak, we need to fill in the gap to bring back some sort of credibility to the seat of the vice president. So the NDC is not really, apart from looking at competence, credentials, we are not looking at just that, apart from regional balances. Obviously, if you have the candidate from the north, the vice will obviously come from the south. So apart from these balance, His Excellency the President and the NDC is looking out for credibility and integrity to bring back some level of confidence in the office of a vice president. Other than that, tomorrow, a vice president will go to the market and people will begin to hoot at him. And that is a high office of the land.
Our sources say that the former president,
yes,
your flag bearer, has already settled on Professor Jane Nanopo-Kwajiman. Yesterday when we spoke to some members of parliament, all of them went in favor of the professor.
Correct. So
is that the same?
The members of parliament are possible, you call them voters or advocates for one particular individual. But from where I sit as a deputy general secretary, I know that quite a number of people are on the list, and that Professor Jane is not short of that list. She actually made it to that list of running mates in the last 2020 election. She was part of the team that bridged the gap of our defeat from 2016. So we went with her, our votes went up. So it does not, there's nothing that suggests that it should be her or it should not be her. If His Excellency the President decides that, okay, given the circumstances that we find ourselves, the kind of problem that we have as a country, step aside for another person to take my running mate slot, I think it's ideal, it's correct. If the president then decides that, okay, I have worked...
The circumstances may mean that you may meet somebody with background in economics.
Let me just
no, I just want to...
If the circumstances... No, but Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia had a background in economics. Under him, we have the worst economic indicators in the history of our country.
Your chairman said that the changes in parliament was because we're going into an election, the economy was going to be a main issue, so we needed somebody with a background in economics to lead your front in parliament.
Yes.
And I'm saying that if it is the same criteria for the sort of a running mate, then clearly you are overlooking Professor Jenano.
Parliament is a fighting wing of the party. Parliament is not the head. We are talking about the head. And we have had circumstances where a vice president is not having an economic background, and he actually performed like this con man who the MPP deceived Ghanaians with. President Akufo-Addo, the MPP sold 2 con men to the people of Ghana, and we bought them mistakenly. The president and his vice president,
and I'm saying that word you are using is not too strong.
People who have the confidence
to use such a word for your political opponents.
People who have the confidence to lie at the State of the Nation address.
These are president and then the vice president.
The confidence to stand.
The very high position of the country.
The biggest,
and to be reduced to comment.
The biggest public offense is when a vice president knows that what he's saying is a lie, but yet he's saying it and people are clapping for him. Unfortunately, ministers of state are clapping for him, and they know he's lying.
And to describe him as a con man,
the president is lying. The vice president is lying. When you go to Kuala Lumpur, sick people cannot get beds. Yet he's saying that I have digitalized your records. If you go to medical service, the most important, procedure of a medical service is not your records. It is how you get medical treatment and get actually healed of your disease.
And the problem didn't start today. That problem has persisted for years.
They are in power.
It's transcended from political party to political party.
Where is the Agenda 111? And I told them recently that where are the dams? Your station did a documentary on the dams, and it proves to the people of Ghana that they collected money from the World Bank and they chopped the money. And the vice president go to the public to say that we have constructed dams. He says it, in front of cameras, without shame, without fear. And he's not a call man. And I have evidence that suggests that it is not true. The vice president says, I've built hospitals in your village. What do they call? Toilets in your villages. You come from a village. Do you see any toilet there? Have you seen any new toilet? Look at the MPP. Do they look like people who perform and keep quiet about it? Look at them trumpeting that an attorney general have set aside judgment that let's clap for him. And if you think that when they built KVIPs under HIPIC, didn't you see the writings that they use? Red. Wherever you are, you see that there's a toilet here. Where are the toilets? A vice president holds a public lecture to lie. He says he has done railway. Weeks before the vision statement, they showed us some short video of a certain rail in whether US or UK coming out of a factory, and that is meant for Ghana. Let's clap for them. And then he says, Temampaka Dam. He built it. It was started by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama and paid for.
Let's talk about Thursday next week.
Yes.
What is agenda?
So I just justified why I say that the president and the vice president are 2 con men the MPP sold to the people of Ghana.
Let's talk about Thursday next week.
Yes.
What is agenda?
Thursday,
how are you approaching it?
We are seeking to fill the gap. Bring on board somebody that will satisfy the people of Ghana with credibility and integrity.
And
somebody who will bring to the high office of a running mate and, of course, an automatic vice president, a leverage of credibility and integrity. Somebody that when he says that I'll protect the public purse, you and I don't have to go and look for police to chase them to bring the purse. So these ones have stolen the purse.
The NEC will meet first. To do what exactly?
No, we'll meet Council of Elders first. Decide on it, because that body is obviously the most respected and highest body. So then we bring their decision and consideration to National Executive Committee. Now, the National Executive Committee is made up of a wider range of people from the regions representing the rank and file of the party, representations from Parliament, former ministers, and of course, the flag bearer himself is a member of NEC, and then the Functional Executive Committee of the party. So, at that level, one would say that is the biggest, most highest consultative body as far as naming a running mate is concerned. So when we have that discussions at that level, what it means is that the rank and file of the party will have endorsed the choice of the primary choice of the candidate.
So therefore, at the level of NEC, after the council meeting, you'll be presented with names or just a name?
Names.
Yeah,
that's why I said
then you take a decision on the names.
That's why I said the people are lobbying. They want to lobby us. I mean, so
and
if you don't lobby us, your name will make it.
and then, are you going to subject the names to voting?
When it calls for voting, it will be done. Of course, all rules of democracy and practice of meetings take place are rules that are applicable to our NEC meetings, and that when the argument is so divided that there have to be a vote. A vote will be allowed. The president is not one, the candidate, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, is not one who wants to tie the party behind his hands. He says, I have a choice. This is my opinion. Talk about it, decide on what you want to settle on. But I do believe that the rank and file of the party is not more interested in debating what the choice of the candidate is. They are all waiting for a candidate to make it up to the team. Yet, we have a very solid political party as compared to our people. They have given birth to another political party. More are going to happen within their party. We have a united executive front led by the General Secretary and the National Chairman, Asidun Ketia. We have a competent, credible flag bearer who has experience. When we have a running mate, then our team is set. This is a team that will manage the message of hope to the people of Ghana. The same team will take responsibility for the best or the performance of the party in government. Unlike these ones who are now metamorphosing and trying to share blames. Who should you blame? An exiting president should take the blame because
personally,
he is going home. Blame him and whitewash the one that is coming, the one who was used to lie to the people of Ghana, scheme and whitewash him so that he looks white.
Finally, and then just 10 seconds.
The black paint, we are going to use the whole black paint in this world to paint Dr. Babu Bawumia.
Are you for continuity or change in the running mate position of the party?
I am for integrity and credibility. That is what is lacking. That is the gap created at the slot of a running mate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
so much for coming through. Mr. Bogbande is a Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, and we are all looking forward to that Thursday meeting, first between the Council of the Party of Elders and then the National Executive Committee of the party. And then after that, they will outdoor the running mate for the presidential candidate, John Dramani Mahama, for the December presidential election. So that is the big day, 7th March, next week, Thursday. Before we go, the intermittent power outages witnessed in recent days dominated the first day of debate of the 2024 State of the Nation address, on a day the Chamber of Parliament and the entire House was plunged into darkness. First by Doomsaw and later by ECG disconnection exercise. More on that shortly, but first, the debate started on a family affair note, as John Jinapor and his brother Samuel Abu Jinapor have to go at each other over their prospective party's record in the energy sector. Minority spokesperson on my Senator John Jinapor spent a considerable amount of his debate time to berate the government for the current power outages.
The load shedding is getting worse by the day. The very day His Excellency the President was delivering the State of the Nation address and boasting, at that very period, the utility companies were shedding load. The situation appears to be exacerbating. Yesterday alone, there was a whopping 530 megawatts of deficits, culminating in curtailment of power to Côte d'Ivoire, to Burkina Faso, and to Togo. You would attest that there was some massive darkness yesterday. Today at 12 p.m., load shedding would commence again. Our investigation indicates that some of the thermal plants are down. Specifically, TAPCO is down, TICO is down, and so they are not generating enough power. But more importantly, there's a lack of fuel in the system. Because of the financial constraints, government has not been able to procure adequate fuel to fire some of our thermal plants, culminating in the load shedding that we're experiencing. 1 month of load shedding is more than enough. This is not sporadic, this is continuous, this is persistent, and we think that the handlers of the power sector should do the onerous thing by informing the people of Ghana so they can plan ahead of time. This deliberate fixation on denial and deceiving the people of Ghana can no longer hold. We therefore call on President Akufo-Addo, Dr. Bawumia, and this government to do the needful by telling the people of Ghana the truth. We also call on government to look for money wherever they can find that money to procure heavy fuel oil and other sources of fuel to power the thermal plants. We cannot have this quantum of thermal complementarity and still shed load.
And that's our show for today's Thursday edition of The Pulse. It came to you live from our studios here in Accra and around the world at myjoyonline.com. For more stories, log on to our website, myjoyonline.com. My name is Elton Gobe. Tomorrow, Friday, we'll be here to bring you the weekend edition. You have an exciting evening.